Welcome to the Reporter Podcast with Beau Berman.
Hi, everybody. This is Reporter, the podcast that delves into the minds and lives of broadcast news reporters and anchors, and sometimes meteorologists, to deliver a behind-the-scenes look at their careers, their methods, best practices, and personal stories from the trenches of journalism. I am Beau Berman. Today, we have Eddie Garcia from KOB TV in New Mexico. Eddie, thanks for joining.
Hey, Beau. Good to hear from you. Thanks for asking me.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Glad to have you here. So one of the most fascinating things I think about your career for people who don't know is that you began in the control room, right, of a TV station or something like that?
Yeah. I would say it's an unconventional path. With the conventional path being, four-year degree, and then finally getting your job on air as a reporter or meteorologist or whatever it is you're going to do on air. I started when I was 16. So it was my first high school job was working in TV behind the scenes. At 16 years old, yeah. In Texas it was. I actually kind of fell into it because of the church that me and my parents were going to at the time was loosely affiliated with this religious TV station in Odessa, Midland, Texas. Odessa is where I grew up. Midland's about 20 miles away, so it's kind of the same area. As you know, you live there. And so one of the hosts at this religious TV station knew that I had an interest in theater because I did church plays with our acting group there, and also knew that I had an interest in photography because, well, surely he saw me with my camcorder, in the mid 90s, running around and trying to film everything. So he came to me and asked if I was looking for a summer job, which I was, as a studio camera operator at this TV station. And so, it's the summer. I'm 16 years old. I have my first car, and my parents, their deal was that they would help me get my first car if I got a job and paid for all the expenses that go with owning a car. So, I needed tires at the time. Studio camera seemed similar to what I wanted to do. So, I said, okay. And little did I know that started my career 22 years ago.
Wow. All because of tires, really.
Yeah, man.
Guys just trying to get some tires.
Well, I had a Mustang, you see, and I had to make sure that it could perform. All four cylinders could perform,
Okay, so you were the studio camera operator, and then just in like 60 seconds or less, just walk me through like the ladder that the path that you took. So the next role, what you worked your way up to, what?
Oh, a little bit of everything, this was all throughout high school, so it was all part-time, but I became floor manager, graphics, did audio. Then I became the director and production manager at the age of 19. Me and some friends decided to do community college 2 years after high school. I graduated in 99. So, pretty much did that until decided that I wanted to move to Austin with some buddies. One of my friends, he was going to UT for radio, television, and film. And I, in my perception at that time, thought, well, I already am in television, so I might as well just go and see if I can find a job in Austin, Texas. And that's whenever I jumped to my first news station was KEYE TV in Austin, Texas. And I did behind the scenes work there, but that's when everything kind of kind of started to change. That's when the course began to change in my career.
So the first, the studio camera job, that was through the church TV station.
Yeah, I mean, it was an independent TV station, but yeah, it was a religious TV station.
Okay. But it wasn't. So I mean, but it was broadcast all over the area. Like, it wasn't like a cable access type of thing.
Yeah, we broadcast mainly to West Texas and Eastern New Mexico. At the time, I believe as I was leaving, they were working some satellite deals, but in general, it was, a regional TV station.
Yeah. So then you go to KEYE in Austin, Texas. You're in the bigger city now.
Oh yeah.
And what was your role there?
Well, I was just trying to get my foot in the door. I had never worked in anything like TV news. As you would imagine, working at a religious TV station is quite different than working in the news industry. And so I actually remember before we were looking to move to Austin, I remember looking up in the phone book while I was still living in Odessa, the phone number for our local CBS affiliate, which in Odessa is KOSA-TV. And as this 19-year-old kid, 20-year-old kid, I'm calling the front desk and I'm like, "Good evening. I wonder if you could be good enough to tell me the name of the CBS TV station in Austin, Texas, so that I may call and apply for a job." And this was like, man, this makes me sound old. Like, this was like before Google, I guess, because I had to look up the number in the phone book. And so anyway, they gave me the name of the production manager, and I called and explained my situation. And the man was good enough to meet me and told me that they weren't hiring at the time, but wanted to keep me on file. So the deal was with my parents, and I moved with 2 other friends to Austin, was that they'd help us move if we got jobs. So we went to this grocery store called Central Market in Austin, which is HEB, and we all got jobs working there. And about a month in, I got a call from the production manager at KEYE-TV. He's like, "Hey, so I've sort of like created a position for you. Are you still interested?" So I said, "Yeah." It was basically studio floor, but I was sort of like assistant floor manager, which such thing doesn't exist, as you know. And that's how I got my foot in the door. But it was my first time ever really working in a news environment, which was a culture shock, to say the least.
Yeah. So, and you were you were still very young. You were like, what, 19 or 20?
20, yeah.
What? And I mean, I guess this will basically reveal your age for the math majors in the room. But what year would that have been?
So I'm 38, and that was so the way that I remember it is I had to start on the morning show, and that was September 2001. So I started on the morning show, I would say sometime the first few days of September 2001. And they decided just a week later that they wanted to transfer me to the evening shift to work on the evening shows, doing studio camera. And so I was to report to duty. My first shift was on a Tuesday, September 11th.
Sorry, you said your first day was September 11th?
My first day transferring to the evening, because I had started morning. My first day transferring to the evening was on September 11th, 2001.
Wow. And what was that day like for you?
Unreal. Everyone knows where they were who was alive, or at least conscious of the world at the time. And I remember very vividly, me and my roommate, we had just moved into our apartment. I'd only been living away from home for like 2 or 3 weeks. I'd never lived away before. And so Mario, my roommate, I was trying to sleep. Finally I was able to sleep in, right? Because I'd been working the morning shift, and those hours are very early, so I was relishing my sleep. And he comes like banging on my door, and he's like, "Hey, something's happened in New York, and something's happening in Washington D.C. Some planes crashed." And I wasn't certain what he was talking about, so wake up, sort of walk to the living room, and the TV's already on, and the first thing I remember seeing is that one, the first tower, which was on fire at the time. Well, I was watching only for a short time, and that's when the second tower was hit. And it was unbelievable. So even then, having not worked in the newsroom, having not being in news in general ever, I called my boss and I'm like, "Hey, I assume this changes things." And he's like, "Yeah, just try to get in when you can."
Wow.
So I remember, just trying to get ready in breaking news mode, but not necessarily working in a newsroom yet. But I remember it's the first time I felt this, I guess now we call it the rush, whenever breaking news is happening, you're a reporter, right?
Mm-hmm.
That sort of internal switch of like, I got to get over there. I have to go and go to work and just switch into gear. So that's the first time I remember having that sensation. As I'm walking out the door, I pause and one of the buildings is collapsing, live on television.
Yeah.
And I remember even at 20 being just like, the world has changed.
Right.
And that was the mindset that I was driving into basically one of my first days in news, was just having had that image of a collapsing World Trade Center in my mind driving to work.
Wow. Yeah. And that rush, you would go on to experience that many more times, but I mean, it must have been wild to be in a newsroom, or near a newsroom or working in a newsroom when on that horrible day.
Oh yeah. I mean, let me tell you, I mean, I worked at the CBS affiliate, right? Excuse me. So as I was walking in the newsroom, we have, televisions all over the place. Everyone has them at their desk, and every single one is turned up. And there's Dan Rather's voice just echoing throughout the building in this surreal sort of way. And I remember our newsroom being eerily quiet. I do remember that there were people there and that they were like intensely working, and a lot of them were on the phone, because Austin, the capital of Texas, we were starting to get reports of threats to federal buildings and state buildings. So we were dealing with that, but the network was carrying the show. Mm-hmm. And I remember they told us that we needed to be on standby in the studio should we need to break in for anything local that was breaking, whether any of the threats were to be taken seriously for the Texas state capitol or anything like that. We would have to be ready to go on. And as the day went on, the newsroom got louder and louder. And then I remember it became this, not having worked in news before, this image that I sort of had of this like bustling, loud, active, chaotic newsroom. And it was very eye-opening. Yeah, very eye-opening to say the least.
Wow. Yeah, I was in high school at that point, but obviously, I mean, that's a whole different experience, and everyone has their memories. And obviously it's even crazier for people, of course, who were in New York, and the many that lost their lives, and those family members who will just forever be changed by that. And, it's funny because, I mean, I think for kids, well, nothing's funny, but I mean, it's interesting that I think for kids now who weren't alive when it happened, there's been so many other things since then that have happened in the way we cover news and Twitter and things like that, that it probably like to them, they're probably like, in some sense, like, what was the big deal? Oh, I mean, I know it was bad, but it's probably hard for them to realize the gravity of that situation at the time. And what that was like, just like how, you said the world changed and just how different that was than everything else that had happened. I mean, obviously there'd been another attack on world trade, I think it was the 90s, but that one wasn't as big. And I mean, there'd been the Oklahoma City bombing, but that was, that had been many years earlier and was kind of in a city that didn't resonate with people as much, nationally or globally. And yeah, I mean, it's just something that I think kids born now, kids who are 10 years old or even 15 now, don't quite grasp. And it's not their fault, but I just think that's just kind of the way it probably is for many of them.
Well, yeah. And, I mean, you were old enough that you remembered the world before September 11th. And as you mentioned, there were those incidents, but I remember, the first, the bombing of, I think it was like the basement of the World Trade Center. And I was a child back then, and me thinking, oh, this is bad. But not really understanding, because, I was a kid grasping the gravity of the situation. But like, you're absolutely right. Anyone born after September 11th, effectively grew up in a different world than we did. And just by virtue of the fact of the number of things that have happened since September 11th, international conflict, and all the things that have developed as far as the way we view government and all those things, I'll tell you, it really was. It was not lost in me at that age that I was witnessing, history. Obviously, right. I mean, I had a cell phone back then. And I remember, just kind of glancing at it as I was walking in the parking lot into KI TV, and just looking down at the date, consciously looking down at the date, saying, okay, what is today? And thinking to myself, yeah, this is going to be one of the ones that, people are going to remember this.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's maybe it's probably the most iconic day in history. I mean, in modern history by the date, like no one, I'm trying to think. I mean, basically, July 4th is known as, July 4th, but
sure.
like 9/11, those numbers just have such a deep meaning and connotation to them. I can't even think of another. I mean, maybe December 25th, but like, just like that's said by the date, no one even says like 12/25.
Yeah.
Really. I mean, it's crazy, but yeah, I mean, so what a wild time for you to be, 19, 20 years old in your first newsroom, just, a week or a few weeks into the job. I mean, what a time to start, but, you didn't run the other way. You actually leaned into that career. So what happened next? What was the next jump up? You're now in the KI studio as like an assistant studio camera operator, right?
Yeah, it's pretty much camera op. Yeah. Well, I stayed in production. With aspirations to, take the similar path that I had at my previous job, which was work my way up from the studio floor to audio, to graphics, to eventually directing. And, for those who may not be in the industry, the director is the person in the control room who, at the time, physically punches up the video and the stories and the camera and helps us assemble the newscast. So that was sort of the gig for me. That's what I thought I wanted to do. And I tried. I did. I tried many things actually, but I started feeling that I was not being fulfilled in my career. I would come in, I would do the work, and I'll tell you this, I have great respect for the men and women who do the technicals in our industry, because they work hard in very difficult conditions, for very little pay.
Yeah.
And so for me though, at the time, I would wonder, is there something more? And this is because, as I mentioned, I was accustomed to performing being an actor in like school plays, and I was a theater major in college and all that. So I sort of had this bug in me, to go out there and to perform. And it came down to a head. A couple of years later, I was on my path to become a director at KITV. I had actually been moved to Master Control. And Master Control is a job that is the person who runs Master Control is responsible for keeping the TV station on the air. So you'll roll the commercial breaks, and you'll program whatever syndicated shows are going to run, and then count the newscast in so that they can do the local news. So basically you're sort of keeping the trains on time, as Master Control. It's an important job, but I learned very quickly that was not the job for me, because this was like when I was about 22, 23. Here I am, 23 years old, working in a dark, cold control room by myself, and my shift started Friday at midnight and lasted till Saturday at noon. Then it was Saturday midnight till Sunday at noon. Then I had like Monday, Tuesday off, and then I did studio floor for the rest of the week. So like I was dying, and again, that's why I have so much respect for the people who do this job and do it well. But like that is not the right place mentally for a 23-year-old to be who is aspiring for more.
Yeah.
I felt very trapped. And so I'll remember another event, and gosh, I really hate to be trying to pull out all these major historical events as name dropping, but I do remember the shuttle Columbia. That is whenever it exploded. It was on a mission, and they had lost contact with it. And I believe it was a Sunday morning. So as Master Control, you have multiple different screens you're looking at. We were running local programming at the time. And then I started seeing some breaking from network on other screens. And I thought, that's unusual, something about Columbia. And then we started getting, there's this box that connects the CBS stations. It's like an intercom. So it sounds very much like this. You'll be working in the control room, and then on the overhead speaker, you'll hear, hey, CBS stations, this is CBS Network Control in New York. We're going to be breaking into some programming here about the shuttle Columbia. All right. So I go and run, and I go find the news director who just happened to be in the building. His name was Tim Gardner, great guy. And I said, hey, Tim, I'm about to break in. Have you heard about the shuttle Columbia? He's like, I've seen a couple things on the wire. What's going on? So me and the news director run back to the control room. I take network live, and that's when they're counting down, and that's when they start making the announcement that the shuttle has been lost, that there's loss in communication, and that there's been an explosion. And so at that point, Tim Gardner looked at me. He was like, all right, stay on top of this. Let me know if anything changes. And I got really excited. I mean, not because, it was a very tragic event, but it was the adrenaline, that same feeling, that pull toward breaking news that energized me. And so like I'd get information. We'd be talking to each other for a moment. We were the only ones in the building, me and the news director, Tim Gardner. And I felt, wow, I'm contributing to something. In some way, I'm contributing here. And that was a very, very addictive feeling, for lack of a better word. It sort of stirred that, wow, I can be part of the process, and, I can be part of what's going on here and make a difference. So to that point that everything changed in my mind.
Yeah. That is interesting because, in many ways, but one thing it brings to mind for me is that I almost wish newsrooms had more of like a team involvement sort of thing with people in the control room and stuff like that. Like, I don't know if there's got to be some way to do that, like create more of a, we're all on the team together, or, this is a bigger picture here. I mean, part of the issue, I think, honestly, is what you already said, which is that the pay is pretty low sometimes for some of those jobs. And I think that leads to a little bit of like chagrin from some of the folks. But yeah, I mean, like, and part of that is just like innate in you, the fact that you were excited, not in like an evil way, but like that the adrenaline, you felt like, hey, we got to get this out there. This is big. Like you had that sense of urgency. And I think some people just don't have that or don't care as much. So, but yeah, I just wish there was a way to like cultivate that more in newsrooms from even people behind the scenes.
It really has to do with, I believe, and we'll get to this a little bit later, but even in my own job right now, as meteorologist at KOB TV, it really takes, in my experience, in order to get everyone on the same page and to get everyone in production on the same page with you, and dare I say even excited about what you're trying to do, is reaching out and listening and I mean, I'll tell you, working a production job is a very thankless job. And when I say production, I mean working in the technical aspect of TV. It's a very thankless job. Oftentimes, I know for a fact I would show up for a job, doing my job back when I was in production, maybe without having interaction with anyone at all. Except for the person who's relieving me. So I believe that getting on the same page with production and other departments requires you, the person who's trying to achieve this, the newsroom person, to reach out and to make an effort to forge at least a respect, and explain what you're trying to do and what you're trying to do it. And in my experience, it can work out quite well. I have a great relationship with my production team at KOB TV. But, but you're right. Ultimately, there are some who work production and they're fine to come in and do their job and do it well and go home and not really have a stake in doing news. And that's fine. That's fine for them. But I became very acutely aware that where I was working overnight master control was not for me. So and it took it was a very hard decision because those who are not from Odessa, Texas, may not realize how vastly different Odessa is from Austin, Texas.
It's like a different world. So,
well, indeed it is. And that is in no way trying to poke Odessa. That's my hometown. That's where I grew up. I love it, and I'll always love it. But as a young 20-something man, I'm like, man, I do not want to move back to Odessa. I do not want to do that. But my parents always made me a deal. They said, hey, if you want to come back, we'll pay for the rest of your college. It'll be on our terms. You'll have to go to schools in West Texas, but we'll pay for it. So that is a deal. I don't care where you're from. So have someone offer to pay for college.
Yeah. You don't turn that down. No.
So I decided to pack up and take my parents up on that offer. And so I remember driving, my dad was in the moving truck and, we were moving me back. And I remember approaching that Midland skyline and thinking, oh, what have I done? What have I done? What have I done? So, yeah, I mean, I quit TV. I was like, you know what? This master control stuff is not for me. I've seen it. I've tried it. I'm done. Mm-hmm. So I went back to school. And in fact, I had to retake classes that I messed up before when I was 19, 20. Even surprising one of my professors. He was my theater professor. And he remembered me from before. And there I am, fall semester, back in his class, and he's just like talking to the new students, and then looks at me, kind of cocks his head to his side, and then just continues talking. But yeah, I mean, at that point, I was done with TV. I got a part-time job working at an advertising agency. My best friend's mom owned it, and she was good enough to hire me as an assistant, just doing odds and ends and stuff like that, just basically paying, so she could pay me. And I did that, and I was in school.
Yeah. So, so how long? Were you going to University of Texas Permian Basin at that point?
I finished up at Midland College.
Midland College, okay. And so you were there, and then did you think you would get back into TV, or did you truly think, I'm probably done with this career?
I thought I was done. By the age of 23, I had worked in TV for 7 years, right? 7 or so. And, I thought I'd done what I wanted to do, from studio camera operator to, director of production. So I thought, I've seen what TV has to offer. Hold on one moment, sorry.
Is that Barkley?
That is Barkley and the Boomer.
You have 2 dogs now?
I do, yeah.
Oh, I didn't know you had a second one.
Yeah, well, so we got Boomer a couple of years later, just because we work a lot, and so we wanted Barkley to have a friend, and so we got Boomer, and they love each other, and they love to bark. So that's their hobby. But anyway, so I was done, man. And, circumstances had come to be that the job that I was working, the part-time job that I was working, couldn't afford to keep me, and so they let me know that, my position was being laid off. And, I was grateful to have had it to begin with. But I wasn't done with school yet. I still had I think like a year and a half left, something like that. So I needed a job. So my best friend, who was living in, or one of my best friends who was living in Austin at the time, came by to visit his mom, who was the owner of the advertising company that I was working at. And he mentioned that he had a relative working at the CBS station in Odessa, KOSA-TV, and that he had just seen him or spoke to him the day before, and that they were hiring, CBS 7 was hiring a news photographer. And, my friend was like, hey, I know you're looking for a job right now. You want me to, say something? And I'm like, yeah, man. So he gave me his relative's number. I called and I got my resume together. Had never done photojournalism. The closest I'd ever done was studio camera. And when I was a kid with my camcorder, right?
Yeah.
So, I did have CBS Austin to put on my resume. So there was that. So I did. I applied for the job, and, I don't know if it was just, if I said the right things during the interview, if my friend's relative had anything to do with it, I don't know. But I got the job. They hired me. They honestly took a chance on me because I'd never done, news photojournalism before.
So this meant you would be a photographer who would ride along, and go get VOs and ride with reporters and possibly shoot packages and the whole 9 yards. And you had never done that. You had done studio cam.
Exactly. And those are two different worlds.
How much did that job pay?
When I started CBS 7,
the photographer,
I want to say they offered me something like $850.
850,000 per year.
Oh yeah. Oh, with the yacht and jet and everything, it was
So
sweet.
$850 an hour.
Yeah, and I guess in my first salary negotiation, I said, wouldn't it be better if we could do 9? And they did 9. So yeah,
there you go. You
an hour.
negotiated up to 9. Yeah, that's big time. So I got to jump backwards a little bit here and fact check you because I'm a journalist or was a journalist. On your KOB.com biography, it says Eddie started his TV career at 17 years old. But I believe that earlier in this interview, you said 16. So we all want to know what the truth is.
It's got to be 16 because that's when I got my first car.
Well, I'm going to write to KOB4 and let them know that they better fix that.
Man. Well, I will make sure that it gets to the person it needs to get to, okay? So you send that and I'll get it.
All right. I don't want viewers to feel lied to,
Well, the thing is there are many years in this industry for me, so sometimes the memory can take a second to jog, you know what I mean?
Eddie started when he was 7 years old.
Yeah, there we go, yeah. And of course, in Texas, that was legal. So
that's right. Part-time weekend studio janitor.
So part-time.
Yeah.
So
you're hired at CBS 7 News, KOSA TV in Odessa, Texas, your hometown. You just moved back. Are you living with your parents or did you get an apartment?
Oh, I was living with my parents at the time.
Living with your parents. And what year would this have been approximately?
Okay, so let's see here. I moved back in July 2004. I would assume that I worked for the advertising agency for about a year. So I'd say 05, maybe. Yeah, it would have to be something like spring 05.
Okay. So you're hired for $9 an hour. You're living with your parents. You're taking on something new. And what happened? How did it go?
College. Well, again, I was finishing college at the time. So I was kind of trying to straddle both these worlds. I was trying to make good on the mistakes that I had before my education. And I was trying to explore this new industry, really. It felt vastly different to me working in news than working behind the scenes in production, even though I did start behind the scenes in news as a news photographer. Well, Odessa, Texas is market 156. So I went to a lot of ribbon cuttings. I remember that. I remember shooting a lot of fender benders. I seem to remember doing a lot when it came to like holiday events, like the lighting of the Christmas tree.
Yeah.
With our anchor Tatum Hubbard, switching the switch to turn on the official Christmas tree of Odessa and stuff like that. But I mean, so really, I was doing the job of the news photographer, which at times can be very exciting, but also there was the mundane of grabbing VOs and VOSOTs and, ribbon cuttings and whatnot. But I remember, so I got hired, it must have been like April or May. And they kept on sending me out to shoot packages, but the reporter would not go with me. So I'd walk into the newsroom, I'd go to the assignment desk, and the assignment manager would say, "Hey, bud, here's a press release for, they're going to be changing the carpet at the mall. So here, go and shoot that as a package for this reporter." Okay. So I'd go out there, I'd shoot the package, I'd get the interviews, and then I would take notes, write information for the reporter, and then I'd come back to the station, ingest my footage into our system, meet with the reporter and say, "Okay, here's the information, here are the notes that I took," and then they would write the package, and then they would front it on air.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, I could do that. I mean, I'm already shooting the package to begin with. So like, I mean, I could write, I could front stuff. And it was actually a little bit irritating because I'm like, why is the reporter not going with me? You know, why am I being sent to go shoot this package by myself when the reporter could very easily go with me? So I kind of thought that was unusual. And then I got my first enterprise story. I had gone to have lunch with my parents, and my mom or my dad said, hey, by the way, they found your great uncle. And I was like, what? Okay, what great uncle? And I did not realize this, and I guess they didn't know that I was clueless about it. I had an uncle who fought in, I guess it was the Korean War, and was listed as missing. They never recovered his body. They never found him. Well, in Papua New Guinea, there had been a discovery of a mass grave, which included U.S. military service members. And my uncle was one of them. So they exhumed his remains with proper military honors and everything, flew it to El Paso, Texas. And the story of it was that they were with a funeral procession going to bring his remains to Pecos, Texas, which is near Odessa. And so there would be a funeral procession, there would be a proper military burial, and it would be the whole thing. And so I pitched this story to my news director, and I said, yeah, it's going to happen on Saturday, and I think that we should do it. And he said, oh, okay, well, we really don't have the staff. We don't really have the reporter for that. But if you wanted to go shoot like a VO or a package, we could have one of the anchors do it. And I said, Jerry, I really would like you to give me a shot at this. And he was like, what do you mean? And I said, I'd really like to be the reporter on this story. And he thought about it for a minute. He said, okay, go gather the stuff, shoot a stand-up, and bring it back, and have the weekend producer look over it, and then we'll see. So I did. I went. And of course it's my family, so I have like all access, to everything. I went and found out where the procession was going to be passing, which was multiple dozens of vehicles. I didn't realize this, but along the way, veterans and various interested parties, I guess, had either through pre-planning or I don't know if it was extemporaneous, but they joined the procession. So by the time I was getting to Pecos, it was huge. It was this motor convoy of flashing lights and emergency vehicles and the limousines and the hearse and all that. And it was a great shot. So I set up and I shot my stand-up with that as the background as the cars are passing by. I get the interviews with the family. I get the burial. I get everything. Basically, I found out when I got back to the station, I got too much. I got 6 interviews, Beau, which, as you know, for a day turn, it's kind of a lot.
Yeah, it's like too many, which is like a weird, I think like people outside the business would kind of say, what do you mean? But it's just like, it's almost it's basically too many.
It's too many, right. So we made the decision to break it into 2 packages. The producer at the time was Armando Saldivar. He helped me write it. He taught me what news writing was. He helped me track it, and he encouraged me. And because of him, I was able to get those pieces on the air. And I actually ended up winning regional Texas Associated Press awards for them.
Wow. For your first 2 stories, you won AP awards.
Yeah. The regional ones in Odessa, Midland. Yeah.
That's pretty crazy. So how did you have time to to do that? Because I mean, newsrooms can be very busy and active and crazy places. And was it just kind of the thing like you were on the weekend and it was a little bit slow, or did you stay late, or how did this? I mean, first of all, amazing stuff from Armando to take the time to help you grow. Invaluable what he did. But like, how was there time for that?
I went on my day off.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Yeah, I went on my day off.
So that was like an inflection point. I mean, that forever changed your career in my eyes. What was it in brief? What was it that made you take that leap? A lot of people would be too afraid to step up and say, I want to do this job that I'm essentially like, you weren't, at least on paper, you weren't qualified for it. But I mean, obviously I mean, for those listening, I mean, you are one of the best storytellers I've ever met, in any market to this day.
Thank you.
Thank
you. Wow.
You were definitely qualified off paper, but on paper you were not qualified. So what gave you the bravery?
Just this, I think I get it from my parents, really. The long and the short of it is my parents grew up dirt poor. My dad picked cotton, and he and my mom decided to uproot for an opportunity in California. He he was working on a farm, but like he was visiting a friend in LA, and there was an aircraft company called McDonnell Douglas Aircraft that was hiring a janitor. And he thought, you know what, I think I'm done with the farm. So he moved my mom there. And I think my oldest sister was born at that time. And he started as a janitor at McDonnell Douglas Aircraft, and he would notice these guys walking in with suits and briefcases, and he says, I want to do that. So he went to night school for 5 years while he was working as a janitor.
Wow.
And got his certification, became he became a programmer. The first computers that they were using to create the wings of the aircraft, I assume for aircraft like the DC-10, things like that. He went to college for that and came back wearing a suit, carrying that briefcase, and being an engineer in that way. And so I grew up hearing these stories, and my dad's like, hey, if one man can do it, you can do it. You just got to apply yourself, and you got to sacrifice and do what it takes. So I carried that with me. And I knew I could do this because I had shot other packages before. I had the experience of performing on stage as a young child. I had the know-how and the creativity because of the, camera work that I did with my own private camcorder when I was a kid. And I felt that gave me what I needed to at least try, to at least attempt,
Yeah.
And so I thought, yeah, I could do this. And so you're right, it was a turning point, because I remember after I shot everything I needed to shoot, I remember, because my parents were there at the funeral too. And so we're in Pecos, and they're like, hey, do you want to grab a bite to eat before you go back to Odessa? And I'm like, yeah, I do. And Pecos is very significant to me because my grandmother lived there. She died when I was in high school, but I grew up going there all the time. And so there's this one restaurant that we would always go to, this one plate that I always loved, and so I'm like, yeah, let's go to that place and let's go have lunch. And so, I'm sitting there, I'm eating, and, my mom is she's an empath, she's very, she has lots of empathy, so she can read my face. Of course, she's my mother. And I remember just sitting there thinking about, wow, I can't believe I just did this. I went out, I bought a shirt, I bought a tie, I ironed it as best as I could. I slapped it on, I shot a package, I did my first stand-up, I did all these things. It was kind of just like the first second I had to debrief and just to sit back. And I remember thinking, wow, this is what I was thinking about when I was working overnight master control in Austin, that, there's this other life that is so different and so much better. And I just remember just thinking that internally and just kind of like nodding my head to myself, like, yeah. I was like, yeah, this is it.
I've made
Yeah. And my mom's looking at me, because she knew the struggle that I went through working over that master control. She was like, yeah, son, you did good. So that was it.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you were hooked on day one. You were hooked, and you proved to yourself very, very quickly that you could hang with the as a reporter. It sounds like.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
Well, I started getting calls on my day off from my news director saying, hey, I know it's your day off, but would you like to report? We're short a reporter. We need someone to cover this story. And I'd be like, yep. Every opportunity I got, I'd create opportunities. I would create my own enterprise without even knowing that that's what a reporter is supposed to do. I created my own enterprise stories, but they still wanted to keep me as a news photographer because, I mean, let's be frank. Hey, why not?
Yeah.
We got a photographer who can report. So we get 2 in 1. And this was before MMJs really were a mainstream thing, because even at Market 156, we had reporter photographer combos.
Right.
So back then, I believe they call it one-man band. I think.
Yeah.
So I seized upon those opportunities, and one day I got a call from our news rival, KOS 9, the NBC affiliate in West Texas, telling me of a job that they think that I would be good for. They wanted to see if I was interested in being a producer and a reporter. And I said, reporter, you say? So I went and I met with this, their news director at the time was named Jay Hendricks. He was also their main anchor. And so they brought me under cloak into the front room, and because I'd been on air a few times and they didn't want, I don't know what they were trying to do, but I met with Jay Hendricks and he's like, yeah, we need a producer and a reporter. You want to do it? And he laid out what the position would be and said, the pay is $24,000. And yeah, you get your foot in the door being a reporter. So that's what I took to. So that is, I guess, my first leverage, you could say.
Yeah, I totally forgot that you had worked at the NBC affiliate, KOS. I forgot about that.
Well, no, I just got a job offer.
Oh, okay. Sorry. So that's what you meant by leverage. Yeah, sorry.
Well, yeah, it was an offer. It was a 24-hour take it or leave it. And so let me back up just a little bit. At the time, we had a news director working at KOSA when I was a photographer there. He was on his way out, and to be frank, there were rumors about that, because there were rumors that we had hired a new news director and a person who had worked at KOS 9, our competitor, by the name of Jose Guyona. And I had friends who worked at KOS who worked with Jose, and I heard all these cautionary tales. Oh, watch out for that guy. He's brutal. He's going to do this. He's going to do that. Heads are going to roll if he starts at CBS 7. So I already kind of have that in the background going on in my head. So when I get this offer at KOS 9, I'm like, well, maybe this is what I need to do. I'll become a reporter. I'll get a little bit more money, and I'll be spared this scary new news director who's going to start.
Yeah, this jerk who's about to come in and clean house, right?
Yeah, I was.
At least that was the rumor, yeah.
So yeah, and I did have the presence of mind, though, to at least go to our general manager, a wonderful man by the name of Marx at CBS 7. And I remember, because everything is rumor. You know how a newsroom is.
Yeah.
Once there are rumblings of change to come, but management's never going to say it until it's already in progress, right?
Right.
So I remember going to Barry's office, and he's like, hey, what's going on, bud? And I'm like, can we talk? And he's like, yeah, no problem, man. What's going on? Very nice, accommodating guy,
Yeah.
And I say, I have been given a job offer. And he's like, really? I'm like, yeah. I said,
Really?
News West 9.
What?
News West 9. News West 9 wants to hire me and make me a producer and a reporter, and they're going to pay me $24,000. You know. So he's like, well, I'll tell you what, I think we could do better than that. And I said, and another thing, I know Jose is coming. He paused.
I know your plans.
He looked at me and he said, didn't really think we could keep that one a secret, huh? Well, he gets his phone, his headset phone, you know, and he says, you mind if I make a call real quick? So he dials a couple numbers. He's like, Jose, Barry, hey, listen, I know you don't start for another few weeks, but I got your first decision you got to make.
Wow.
Eddie Garcia is in here, and he is being offered a position at News West 9 to be a producer and a reporter, and he wants to see if we can work with him on that. And so he's like, and then he gives me the headset. And the first time I ever spoke to Jose was on the phone. And he's like, hey, what's up, man? Yo, dog. Yeah, no, I'm really excited to start CBS 7, dude. And I've been watching you, and you're like doing a good job. And you're like, man, like you got potential. Like I want you to be part of my team. Yeah, like you just want to be a reporter and drop the producer part. And I'm like, yeah. So he's like, yeah. So let's do that. Give the phone to Barry. So he did. And Barry says, okay, congratulations. Oh, and we're going to give you more money than that. So I got $25,000. And so the deal was that I would continue in my duties as photographer, part-time reporter until Jose started, and then Jose would determine my new schedule as a reporter. So I became a reporter at CBS 7 News.
Market 156. So that was like 2000. Was that?
I would say
2006.
Late 06, possibly.
Yeah. Wow. So you're now an on-air news reporter. You did an amazing job of like leveraging and proving your way into it. Wow. And, for those listening to this long lead up story, I mean, Eddie is now, Eddie's an award-winning reporter at this point, and currently is, has his meteorology certification from Mississippi State University, which is pretty much known as the best or one of the best places to get your certification from. So you've come a long way. So that was 2006. I know I met you in the summer of 2008 whenever I started at that station. And the crazy thing is, I mean, you were this like very polished veteran, storyteller. I mean, had you not told me that you had been a photographer, I wouldn't have believed you, So it was pretty amazing to see someone. But you know what? I mean, it just goes to show, and the reason we do this podcast is, you can take 100 different pathways to get where you're going, whether it's news reporting or anything. I mean, there's different pathways, but it does take hard work. It takes some courage. It takes, you have to take some risks. And, there's also some disappointments on that road too, I think, and some tough times.
Oh, for sure. I enjoyed for many years my career being on an upward trajectory, and in many ways it still is, but there are bumps along the way. The path to, the path from point A to point B is rarely in a straight line and is rarely as short as you think it's going to be.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, after my career at CBS 7 and working with all of you guys there, best experience of my life was working with you guys at CBS 7. Best young experience of my life, because we were all new, we were all hungry, we all were passionate and hard workers, and we could party just as hard as we could work, you know.
Heck
And,
yeah. You had a lot of, so Eddie ended up basically living in a house that his parents owned, and right? I mean, that was basically the situation.
No, I owned it.
You owned it. Okay, you owned the house. You had a house. That's right. I forgot. You had Eddie owned a home, and it was funny. I mean, you know, small market news. You were renting out rooms to two of our coworkers, Gary and Alan, and then you guys would throw some pretty epic parties that everybody could come to.
They were great, man. Like, you know, that's, to me, that I missed out on the 4-year university experience, but I feel like sort of the private lives we lived off the air made up for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
To say the least.
You know, it's a bunch of young people with a very stressful job, an important job, and they work hard. And at the end of the day, I mean, it was all kosher. It was all good stuff, but we played very hard as well. Was definitely the case.
Oh yeah.
I mean, there was a bar.
Oh, yeah.
There was a bar in our building, so to speak, because the station was in a mall. So you had to walk about 100 yards, and you were at that bar. So I definitely remember some happy hours there that occurred after the 10 o'clock news, because it's Central Time for those of you who don't know. So our newscast was always 10 o'clock, which I miss that. I miss being done at 10:30 at night, you know, on the East Coast.
You're on it's 11? It's
11, yeah. So you're not done till 11:30, you know, and then God help you if you're home before midnight, and then if you're a night side person like I've always been, you end up staying up till 2 a.m. usually because you're just trying to wind down. So.
But yeah, I mean, but that's the life of Nightsiders, you know?
That is the life. I mean, a lot of the photographers I know to this day will stay up till 5 and 6 a.m., which I could never do that, but they just can't wind down. I mean, they treat it more like the way that people who work 9 to 5 jobs treat their lives, you know, where you come home and then you stay up for 6 hours and then you go to bed. And I can't do that, but it is tough to
Me either. Maybe I could back in the CBS 7 days, but not at 38. I'll tell you that. I can't do that.
yeah, for sure. Nor do I want to. I don't think it's healthy to, you know, I'm actually a pretty big believer about, you know, trying to get enough sleep. And they say that the sleep you get before midnight is healthier, actually, which is a very natural segue into what's probably the most bizarre story I mean, maybe that I've ever covered, or it's just kind of sad really that I don't know the whole thing. But so when I was at CBS 7 with Eddie, I came up with this idea because whatever Jose Guyona, our news director, for some reason, I guess I was so young and so inexperienced that I thought sweeps pieces, you know, a story that you did for sweeps had to like change the world. I don't know. I had this very like incorrect.
Yes.
And I had like so much pressure on my own shoulders when he was like, Beau, I want you to do a sweeps piece. And I thought, oh my God, this is, you know, my higher calling. This is my chance. You know, Jose thinks I'm good. And I thought I have to blow him out of the water. And unfortunately, I didn't really have any sources at all. I had no sources, not a single source. So I didn't have any good tips. So I had to just kind of manufacture, you know, like a think piece or like a, you know, a long form thing. And so we had this guy we worked with, a great guy named Jason, and he was in master control of all places. So you could relate to it because you had kind of lived that lifestyle, and he would come in and not really talk to many people because he was in a different room. And I remember I used to always talk with him to say hello, things like that. And, but he told me that he was an insomniac. And so that really struck me because I'd never met someone like that. And he basically said he never slept. And I mean, sadly for Jason, I mean, it wasn't hard to believe because he did kind of look sort of tired a lot. And so I thought, well, man, would you talk about that publicly? And he was like, no. So for weeks and months, I would always just check in with him and see how he was doing and see if he'd be willing to talk about it. And finally I convinced him, and he said, yeah, I would. So the place where the story took a left turn though was that for some reason I felt that I had to make it incredibly cinematic. I was like, I was like, so what I want to do is illustrate how lonely it is to be an insomniac when you're awake in the middle of the night. So what I want to have to do is have Jason walk down the middle of a busy street at 2 a.m. And unfortunately, this was being filmed in February, and that was like probably the coldest February in Odessa history. There was ice everywhere. So
Yeah.
what we like went out at like midnight. I think you talked me into not doing it at 3 a.m. and we went out at like midnight in a live truck. I don't think we had permission to do this. And we had to, I was standing on top of an icy live truck. We were in the middle of 42nd Street, which is like the busiest street in Odessa. And we're all freezing our asses off. And we have Jason walk down the street in the dark.
Well, listen, we had to get the shot.
We could see our breaths. And then we go to a diner. And I still remember you're getting these creative shots from behind a coffee cup, and you're basically doing all the work, and I'm just kind of standing there. And oh man,
I will say this: we could have planned it out better. I think we had, midnight's kind of a late start for a sweep shoot.
Yeah.
But I will never forget how cold it felt. And of course, you come up from the Northeast, so cold.
Yeah.
But to me, it was a very well, you know what? I was honored that you asked me to help you shoot it.
Well, I mean, looking back on it, that was really, really nice of you to do what you did, which was basically take, your off time and help me shoot this goofy story. But, it was definitely a learning experience. And then we interviewed that doctor who basically went really, really far with his statements. He was like, if you don't get enough sleep, you will die.
You will commit. I remember that for some reason, we brought Jason to our interview with the doctor.
Oh my God.
So he came with us. So when we were interviewing the doctor, Jason was in the room. And, you're asking the questions. You're like, okay, well, when it comes to insomnia, what are not to be over dramatic here, but what are the worst case scenarios? And so, the doctor's listing all these terrible things that can happen, but all the while his eyes keep on darting towards Jason, who's hearing all this stuff. So with an insomniac in the room, he finally, sort of spits out, the worst things that could happen. And then, I'll never forget, the last part of that soundbite was him saying, and he was like, yeah, and eventually it could lead to suicide. And there's Jason listening.
Poor Jason's in the room with us, and the guy's like, yeah, I mean, suicide, murder, all kinds of things if you don't get enough sleep.
Homicide, suicide, that was a soundbite, yeah.
Oh yeah,
but I remember he couldn't quite get the word suicide out because he was looking at Jason as he was saying the word.
That story was, I think we both probably learned a little bit about vetting, a story and the interviews you're going to be doing, and not bringing the person you're talking about with you to the doctor's office. I mean, we basically convinced that doctor to do a clinical evaluation of Jason on the spot in front of us with cameras, and then talk about very tragic outcomes that can occur in front of Jason, who literally was dealing with this problem. So it was probably not the most ethical situation looking back on it. And, again, this is market. When I started,
156.
It was bigger, Eddie. It was bigger when I started. It was 151 by then.
Whoa, kid. Whoa.
Yeah, maybe the oil boom, people were moving there. But, that was a wild story. I mean, for what it was, I think it was probably fascinating. It was probably about 5 minutes too long, I'm sure. To this day, I have a problem with making stories too long. But I seriously think that was a 7-minute story about insomnia in West Texas. I think we put very dramatic music with it. We were basically telling everybody, if you don't sleep, you're gonna die tomorrow.
Well, hopefully that long piece helped insomniacs get some rest.
Yeah. No, actually, to our credit, though, I will say there is a book called Why We Sleep, and it's by a very, very, very respected neuroscientist and sleep expert and doctor from Stanford University. So he's no joke. He's not a snake oil salesman or anything. And he has years and years of research. And he basically says God darn it, we need to be getting 8 hours of sleep a night, or 10.
Yeah.
And he's none of us do it. We all think we're too cool for that. We have too many responsibilities. It's not sexy in our culture to sleep. And he's we are screwing ourselves. It is a major, major issue. There's more and more evidence that lack of sleep can actually lead to Alzheimer's later on in life and dementia. And, you're creating little bits of damage every time you get basically less than like 7.5 hours of sleep. So anyway,
Oh yeah.
and this is in a like recently published book in the last year that's doing really well. Actually, it's selling a lot of copies. So it is very difficult in life, you know, with kids and relationships and jobs. But he's like, we're the only species that will like deprive ourselves of sleep for no biological reason. So like, you know, it's like if you're like a wolf, you know, you're lacking sleep because you're like out hunting and stuff, or you're, you know, nursing your young. But as humans, we'll do it so we can catch up on episode reruns of The Office. You know, we're just, I want to see this movie, so I'm just gonna push through my desperately tired body, you know, and just watch this movie. Or, you know, I'm just gonna go drinking with the boys. And it's like, you know, there's no reason to do that other than just, I don't know what, social pressure. So anyway, there's my rant.
I mean, you know what? I'm with you. A lot of people will brag and say, oh, you know, I got 3 hours of sleep last night. I'll brag and I'll say, hey, I got to sleep at 8:30 last night. Yeah, you know.
Yeah.
I prefer sleep. I prefer sleeping longer.
Yeah. So I mean, it's just, you know, anyway. But we were on the right track there, but it was just very, very dramatic, that piece.
Yeah.
But I mean, it did see. You know, to this day, I still think, you know, sitting down with an insomniac is an interesting, fascinating topic. It's just, you know, I didn't understand what Sweep's piece was. I thought it had to be 8 minutes and really dramatic and have music and, you know, blow people away
I think your notion about the story and your approach was on the right track, because as storytellers, we endeavor to show the actuality of the people that we portray, or that would not that we portray, that we feature.
Right.
So the instincts to, you know, maybe we didn't have the technology that we needed back then, but almost like the time lapse of Jason in his apartment, you know, going through an entire day time lapsed, you know, could have been one approach. Following the character, the person in question, I think was the right instinct, and what proves, you know, even in the very beginning, you had your priorities in the right place as a very skilled storyteller. So I just think execution is a skill within itself.
Yeah.
And how we execute these stories and tell these stories about these people, showing the actuality of their situation, and portraying the reality of their lives, is very hard to capture sometimes, especially if you're limited on time.
Right. So we were doing that basically, like, you know, we're on salary, so we're not being paid hourly, and there was no overtime. I don't know if that was legal back then, but we were not paid overtime at all. So,
or comp days.
It might be a Texas thing. I don't know.
Yeah, probably.
But everything's a Texas thing, you know. But you know, you're working there in the news business at age 12. Eddie Garcia gets his start, and Beau works 90 hours a week and is paid the same amount of money. Yeah, I mean, I think the thing was I wanted to show that guy at night. I felt we needed to show him during the nighttime, and man, did that suck, because, you know, it was during our off time and we were tired and it was really cold out. But I just felt like you can't do a story about an insomniac and show him at noon, you know, really. I mean, you could, but, like, you know, you got to show him like when he's up and he's by himself and he feels like he's the only man on earth, because I know, you know, anyway. But it was a great learning experience. I mean, and that's what that market was. I mean, my goodness, my first report, I'll never forget, you know, Jose sends me out. Well, the first ride along I did was with Greg Morgan, who was like a meteorologist, and he takes me out in his truck to shoot a VO, which is just crazy that meteorologists are shooting VOs for you. But Greg Morgan shoots a VO of a car crash down the street. And that was my first ride along. And then I think the same day, or maybe the next day, Jose sent me to cover a tree that had fallen down. That was, he wanted to start me off slow. I did a look live. I don't even think it hit air, or it might have. It was like 30 seconds. But yeah, I mean, I was god awful. I was horrible at that time. But, you know, I've talked about this with somebody else on this podcast, and it's you know, the good news directors are able to sift through, you know, the early nerves and rough spots and people who are rough around the edges, but spot the talent, you know, that's going to emerge or, you know, potential they have. And so I think, you know, not to be like braggadocious, but I think he saw that to some extent in me and definitely in you, and that he was willing to take that chance on you, you know, because he was really, taken a risk with you because he was a brand new news director and he was young. I mean, so when he hired me, he was 33. So when he hired you, he was probably 31, 30 years old as a news director. So
yeah, he was very young. Mm-hmm.
Took a chance. So you were in Odessa and you won like a ton of Texas Associated Press broadcasters first place awards. I think at one point you might have won best reporter, small market reporter in the state, right?
I was up for it, but I got second. But you know what? That's all right.
But I mean, you won second best reporter in the entire state of Texas for small market TV, right?
Yeah, that was when I was on my way out. I believe that was probably 09.
Okay, yeah. But do you remember? I loved being in that newsroom with you, and you were an incredible mentor for me. I mean, to this day, I still can't write stories and weave it together the way that you could with video, and you were a fantastic editor. It was really in writer was one of your gifts, and I guess really the whole thing. I mean, the cinematic filming and the ideas for shots, and so I learned a ton from you, and to this day aspire to be the type of storyteller that you are and or were. And the reason I speak in past tense is not that Eddie has passed away; it's that he moved on to really a different sector of the business. And so how did that come about? I mean, you're this up and coming reporter. You've carved your own path. You're winning awards. You're the second best reporter in the state of Texas, small market. And then you just take this turn and you jump to a much, much bigger market, top 50, I believe. But you're talk about that transition.
Well, yeah, you're talking about whenever I jumped to Albuquerque. I currently still am in Albuquerque. I left Odessa September 2010. And I got the job here at KOB as general assignment reporter with the plan to serve out my contract. I signed a 3-year deal here, get my feet wet in a larger market because, I, number one, had only lived in one large city in my life, which was Austin. I grew up in Odessa. So this was me living in a new, large, compared to Odessa, a large city, exclusively as a reporter, an on-air person. And even though I had been on air for years in Odessa, my hometown, it was different. That's when I came here. I was like, wow, this is like real. I mean, this is like going from, in a span of like 6 years, overnight master control to top, market 44 reporter. And it was an intimidating proposition for me because we all have the things in our lives that drive us mentally, but also we have those parts of ourselves that are not helpful. And one of my issues is not always, but sometimes in the back of my head, I have what's considered imposter's syndrome.
Ah, yes.
Meaning I know I really did not take a traditional path to become a journalist. I know that I didn't have the journalism degree. I didn't come up like most reporters did. And I'm acutely aware of that. And sometimes whenever facing an intimidating situation, for this one, becoming a reporter in a news market, sort of the feeling, the bad feeling in the back of my head of like, oh, they're going to see right through me. They're going to see right through me that I'm just some Odessa kid who got lucky one day and they let him tell some stories and he did a good job at Odessa, but now we're in the real deal. This is the real world. This is a different state. People don't know me here. I didn't grow up. And so I had to put those thoughts away, because I find that if you entertain that kind of negative energy, it will affect your performance.
Yeah.
Whether
absolutely.
You know it or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Very true. What helped me, honestly, a huge thing that helped me was just getting older and like, and by getting older, I mean, like, like, so it's just like more experience. So when I learned, like, honestly, when I learned that imposter syndrome was a term, that actually helped
Mm-hmm.
me hugely, because I honestly thought I was the only one. I was like, oh, it's just me. Like, I suck. You
Exactly.
know, I'm here by accident. You know, I'm horrible. I don't deserve this. And then when I heard that, like, that's a thing that other people feel, I was like, oh, okay. So, you know, this is just like a human thing. You know, this is something that people feel, you know, and I'm not alone. And that was hugely, you know, like, I almost wish I would have known that earlier. I definitely do, that was a term, because it would have really given me more confidence just to know that I wasn't the only one. But I thought I was the only one, you know, who doubted myself and, you know, felt out of place.
Likewise. And it did, you know, same thing. You know, I'm not saying that I have the syndrome itself. I'm just saying that, you know, those thoughts.
Sure.
But absolutely, it was immensely helpful. Me finding out probably around the same time you did. There must have been an article or something. But realizing that, I mean, I think that if you can tap into, and I think that as a storyteller, this is where it is, if you can tap into that humanity, that driving force that kind of makes us alike in some ways. Everyone has self-doubt at some point in their life. Everyone is going to feel intimidated by doing something new or being somewhere new. But I think it's in understanding the humanity of this is natural. A lot of other people are feeling this. And so the way that we respond in our careers is not, oh, I hope I don't get imposter syndrome. It's going to happen. It's in how you react to such things.
Yeah.
And I use it, you know. I had, I would say that I had a little bit of difficulty doing general assignments when I was new at KOB.
So were you hired in for weather or for general assignment?
No, just general assignments news.
Ah, okay. I couldn't quite remember. So you were hired as general assignment, and then you were having some trouble, you said.
I was just having trouble making contacts. You know, our industry has many facets, and one of them is the morning editorial meeting, and if you work night side, the afternoon editorial meeting. Meetings, even at CBS 7, I felt were never my strong point.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you come in, you have the pressure to pitch your best stuff, enterprise, not received from a paper, not gotten from anywhere else, a unique, vetted story that is turnable.
Yeah.
And I found difficulty being in a new market doing that. I had difficulty finding my beat, as it were.
And just to jump in quickly, I mean, for the record, you know, I don't know who your news director was, and I don't need to know, but like a good management team understands that when you're new, it can take up to a year or two to develop good sources. So I don't know, you know, what your pitches sounded like, you know, which might have been on you, but you know, it also might be on management too. And what I've found is that management should understand that. I mean, you should also be working hard to, you know, network, and there's strategies you can do. One of them is take a different route to work every day. You know, I've been told, because you see different things, you know, don't just take the same route and you'll get story ideas. But like, you know, that's a two-way street, for the record. I just want to, you know, tell anyone listening that I truly believe that, you know, it's on the reporter, but it's also on management to realize, okay, this person's new. Like, they're not going to have, you know, earth-shattering pitches on day one. Okay.
Yeah, no, and you know, and I think that was understood at the time. You know, but it was, so whenever I was living in Odessa as a reporter and I was working really hard, I was burning that candle pretty hot and at both ends.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
I wouldn't use my vacation time. I really wouldn't give myself opportunity to rest very much, because I wanted to do the thing from day one. I wanted to prove why I deserved to be on air doing my job. And so that pushed me to really not focus so much on the things that I later learned is the work-life balance for me, in my estimation of life, is crucial.
Yeah.
In Odessa, it was 100% work, and whatever life I could squeeze in, parties and late night out, whatever, right?
Right.
So when I got here, I felt pretty burnt already, working as general assignments reporter. And I think that it was that fatigue that I started feeling settling in, because like at this point, we're talking 2010, 2011. So I had been reporting for half a decade, I guess, at that point. And I just feel like it was that sort of fatigue that was sort of working against me. And I started to hate it, to be real with you. I really did.
The reporting aspect of it.
Yeah. I did, because I was disappointed. I knew my potential. I knew my vision for certain stories, but for whatever reason, I couldn't execute it a lot of the time. So I became dissatisfied with my work.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a hard thing. Reporting for me had never, I'm not going to say that it was easy, because, reporting is a job that you work at and you get skilled at over the years, but there wasn't that, I don't know. I didn't feel that same rush of going out and getting my first story. You know what I mean? I didn't feel that. So, I was sort of thinking, okay, well, maybe it's time to change course. In my personal life, things had settled. I have someone at home, so I wanted to spend more time at home. I wanted a more stable schedule. As you know, reporting schedules can shift and change all the time. There is no really set schedule for reporting. You may be dayside for a long time, but sometimes you might switch to nightside, and who knows? So I wanted something else, and I thought, well, maybe I should be an anchor. Maybe that's something I should start looking toward.
Mm-hmm.
And then an opportunity presented itself. My news director at the time said, hey, we are going to have an opening in the weather department. We like your live shot presence. We like your personality and your style when you're on air, especially when you're out covering, whatever weather event I might have before, and we want to see if that translates to the screen. Would you be interested in trying weather? And to be honest, up until that moment, I hadn't really seriously thought about it. Now, while in Odessa, I covered Hurricane Katrina. We went to Mississippi and covered the damage. I was in Hurricane Ike. We went storm chasing tornadoes, did wildfires, the whole thing, the things that we used to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, I always kind of seem to excel in those situations, so why not? So we did a screen test. Well, actually, I had to come in early in the morning because I believe I was working dayside at the time. So I'd come in a couple hours early, and the morning meteorologist would train me. And we did that for a couple months. I'd come in early every day. He trained me. Then I do my day turns, my reports of the day. And then we did a screen test, and they liked it. And I liked it. There was a freedom in it. It reminded me of doing a live shot, but not quite a live shot,
Yeah.
And so they promoted me to weekend forecaster. And it was at that moment that I thought, okay, I'm liking this. I can see myself doing this. So I decided to sign up and do the school. If I'm going to do the thing, I might as well do it right. So I signed up for distance learning at Mississippi State University, part of the broadcast meteorology program. Started doing that. And within 8 months to a year of weekend meteorologist, I was promoted to the position of the chief meteorologist position. Now, at the time, I wasn't a meteorologist. I was still in school. I was a forecaster. And I believe that the title that they gave me was lead forecaster.
Mm-hmm.
So I was doing that full time, and I was earning my degree at Mississippi State University full time.
Wow. Oh, you're always working.
Yeah.
Working
Let me tell you, that math is intimidating.
So you did get the certificate. Is it a degree or certificate? What's that called?
It's a certificate, and it is a 3-year program, and it's I believe 12 hours per semester, 3 semesters a year, fall, spring, and summer. You do that. You go out to Mississippi, to the university itself for like the last, basically for your final exam to prepare you for it. And you take it online, and then if you pass with I think it's a 80 or above, you're certified, and you can call yourself a meteorologist.
Wow.
So yeah, that's where I was, and there were a few bumps along the way. Management changes all the time in television, depending on what station you work at, for various reasons. And so there was a change in management, and so with a new team, they deemed that it was better for me to get that certification first. We had a weekend meteorologist, a certified meteorologist at the time, and they felt that swapping us, in other words, putting me back on the weekends and putting him in the evening position, was the right thing to do. Because the reality of the situation was that he had his degree, he had the seal, he had everything that he needed, and I did not yet. So that change was made in, I think, back in 2014. That's when I learned that not just in this industry, but in life, it's not about the things that happen to you. It's about your response to those things.
Yeah, very true.
And it was a major blow to me. It really was. But I took a year off from pursuing that certification because I didn't think I was in the headspace to do it. But about a year later, I thought, no, you know what? I'm already doing this. I'm going to finish it. So I did. I went back, finished it. I, in the interim, carved a pretty good beat for myself, which is science, weather-related, environmental-related, nature, space, all that sort of fun stuff. The stories I never got to do as a general assignments reporter. I created a beat for myself doing those sorts of things when I wasn't doing weather on the weekends. And it was wonderful. I got to meet people and do things that I never thought were possible in doing this. I forged a relationship with the Air Force Research Lab, which helped me do experiments. In fact, I was able to launch my own franchise called You Asked For It, because, we're Channel 4, so it's You Asked For It, right? And my idea is, the question in the room was, hey, right now people are getting their weather from their phones. So what do we do to see that they continue to watch the local news to get their weather? And my thought was, well, since they have their phones in their hands anyway, why don't we ask them to record a question? Everyone, Snapchat culture, everyone likes to put themselves on social media. Doesn't seem like there's a lot of camera shy people out there anymore. Ask a weather question, and I will play that question on the air, and I will do a cool experiment to explain the science and weather principle behind it. It tested well, and so that is now one of the things that I have on my brand.
Awesome. Yeah, very cool. Well, that's kind of the career journey there, from 16 or 17 years old, asked to take on the summer job because you needed to earn money for tires and whatnot, and getting involved in the religious TV station. all the way to, taking some big chances on yourself, betting on yourself, which I love. I love that concept of placing a bet on yourself.
Yeah.
Mostly because you can literally, put your thumb on the scale and help yourself win that bet, whereas if I bet on you, I have no control. If I bet on someone else, I have no control. But if I bet on myself, I may lose and I'll go down, in a ball of fire, but I can also try to exert control over how that bet is going to turn out. And if I win, then it's a huge win. So I love that. It's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the podcast, is to just tell this story of just your amazing journey, because it always impressed me. I took more of the traditional route, and majored in broadcast journalism, 4-year degree, and came right out at age 22 into a TV market. And when you were 23, you'd already been in TV as a paid TV professional for 7 years. So different routes, for different people, but always loved your story, and it's an evolving one that is not over. So you're partway through, and we'll see where the future takes you. So could you see one thing I need to ask you, because we're going to wrap up here, but one thing I need to ask you is it's a tragedy to me that you're not, telling. Well, I guess you just said you're doing the nature reporting still. Is that accurate? You're doing the nature science, so you are still reporting?
So, well, right now I am doing. I'm the evening meteorologist for the 5. No reporting. No. Our other meteorologist got a great job in. Our evening meteorologist got a great job in Phoenix. So he jumped, and he had been doing it Monday through Friday, and a great guy, just high quality guy.
Yeah.
And he jumped, he's in a big, he's in Phoenix. So that's a big market. And so I am now working the evening shows Monday through Friday, but I'm not reporting right now.
Okay. Well, if it's something you're ever willing to do again, I know you said at one point you kind of started to kind of despise that grind, and it definitely is a grind, but I think the world is a better place with your storytelling and reporting. So, but
it's very kind of you.
No, I mean it. But as we get older, definitely anchoring and other things, can become a little bit attractive. So I totally hear you on that. And by the way, is that story that you did, the first 2 stories that you did about the family, what was it called? Not a parade, but like the journey. What do you call that? The procession.
The funeral procession. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Was that, are those online somewhere? Do those live online? Could I watch those or no?
I don't think we had the capability back then. I would have to go digging in either beta tapes or VHS to see if I could find that.
Yeah. Well, someday you should take 5 hours and do that. Because I think at some point it would be cool to show that to family members or just interested parties like me. Just your very first story, and which ended up being an award winner.
Well, even then it was probably very rough. I'd probably be cringing to watch nowadays to watch it. I'd be happy to do something like that. I don't know. Boy, you know how it is. I feel like it took me years to sort of. I feel like it took me years to find my voice as a reporter, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, it literally took me about a year, because I remember Jose telling me, "Dude, dog, you got to fix your voice." I was like, "What?" And my voice did not sound the way it sounds now, really. And he was just like, "Yeah." He's like, "Dog, you got to fix your voice. It's too sing-songy. You sound like someone who's trying to be a reporter. You don't sound like a reporter."
Yeah.
And and he was absolutely right. But I just didn't.
Well, it's a common thing. It's a very common thing,
Yeah. But and then he got me right, and from then on, now people literally pay me to do my quote reporter voice, and it's also like a party trick. So it's I've come a long way, because it was really bad back then.
Well, we all were bad back then. It doesn't matter who you were.
Yeah.
We were all starting on this journey together. And, you know, I think it's significant. I mean, it's been how many years since we've worked together? A decade.
Yeah.
And even though we don't talk on the phone every day, we still keep up, you know?
Yeah, that's true.
I do with those who are, you know, I just talked to Liz Adiola the other day. I messaged her as I was listening to your podcast with her and congratulated her success. And it's just really cool to see how people have evolved and changed over the years, you know, especially in this industry.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love catching up with people and checking in on their journey, and everyone has a different pathway, and that's one of the beauties of this opportunity to do this podcast. Is it, if nothing else, it allows me just to catch up with friends. It's a good excuse to do that. So even if these episodes get 0 listeners, that's fine with me, because it's just a passion project to follow up with people's journeys, and everyone has a story to tell, you know, and there's some great lessons to be learned, even, you know, just talking to everybody. So, and actually anybody who's listening, and if anybody, here's like a weird free plug for a company that I do not get paid by, or I don't even know who owns it. But if anyone is trying to convert videos, like DVDs or VHS tapes, and just get them online quickly, the best way to do it that I've found, and shout out to my cousin Matt who told me about this, but there's a product online called El Gato, which, you know, if you're a Spanish speaker, just means the cat in Spanish. But El Gato is a product that you can buy on Amazon, I think, or eBay. I think I got mine on eBay because it was cheaper, maybe Amazon, but I think it's like $50. It might be $75, but it's awesome. And you just plug it right from your TV to your computer. You do have to have like a VHS player or a DVD player also hooked up to your TV, which I fortunately have. I feel like I'm 90 years old, but I do have a VHS DVD combo player. So you have that, the DVD, you know, VHS combo, you plug that into your TV, and then you just go TV right to laptop. So I have it right to my MacBook, and I can convert any video, you know, basically straight to YouTube if I want, or, you know, straight to an MP4. And it's awesome. It's very fast. It's like real time. It took me a while to figure out how to do it in color. I was missing something, but it's in color. It's color TV. And you know, it's funny. I mean, you can even take stuff that's like, it's been really fun actually, because I have these like old VHS tapes I would record of like football games back in the late 90s, or like TV shows, and you see the commercials from back then. And it's just like hilarious. Like, you know, just watching the old ballpark hot dog commercials with Michael Jordan, or like even our local TV promos. I have some of those I realized on VHS by accident.
Oh man.
So it's just fun, and you can put anything you want, you know, up on YouTube, and you know, even old, you know, so it's just fun. But this tool makes it really, really easy to do. So
I have it. I love it. Yeah, I got it about a year ago.
Oh, you have one?
I do. I have one, and it is amazing. Yeah, man, because, you know, that camcorder I was telling you about when I was a kid?
Yeah.
So, like, I found all those old tapes, and now I'm able to, like, see literally where everything started for me, you know?
Yeah.
And even to the point that I ran across a VHS tape where it starts with this news open, and it says, "You're watching Super 7 News at 10." And then it starts with this anchor, I believe it was Pamela Ham, and it's CBS 7 before we called it CBS 7. It was KOSA TV, and it said, I forgot that I'd done this. This video of this grass fire has been sent to us by newshound amateur photographer Edward Garcia, who gave us this video.
Wow.
Eddie gets a newshound t-shirt. Thank you for sending your video.
Wow.
And so that was my first time on KOSA, and I still have the newshound t-shirt.
Wow. That's awesome. That is awesome. Very cool. Yeah, what a throwback. Yeah, so El Gato is a great product that is very fun and very helpful. So highly recommended to everybody out there who might be listening and need to so when you're converting old like mini DV tapes or something like that, do you have to have a camera that cooperates with them, and then you plug the El Gato into that camera? Is that how it works?
Yeah, just whatever player. I had to find a VHS player. And I suppose if I wanted to convert my like beta tapes and all that, I'd have to find like a beta player, you know?
Yeah. It can be tough actually, but yeah. So anyway, well, Eddie, we're gonna skip the rapid fire questions today because this is the longest episode of the podcast.
Oh man, please edit me down. I went too long. I'm so sorry, bro.
No, there's some good stuff in here, so we'll probably keep it in full. But we're gonna skip the rapid fire. This has been more of a slow burn, if you will. So good times catching up with you, and it'll be interesting to follow your career as it continues and progresses. And I have a feeling there's a lot more to come, whether it's in New Mexico or elsewhere eventually. But I know either way, you'll do a great job and be an asset to KOB, and if that ever changes, somebody else. So thanks for taking the time out. And hey, one last thing: if people want to find you online or reach out to you, where's the best place to find you, and what are your handles?
Facebook page, I got Eddie Garcia TV, and Twitter, it's at Eddie Garcia KOB.
Eddie Garcia TV is Facebook, and Twitter is what?
At Eddie Garcia KOB.
Okay, and then your cell phone number? Just kidding. All right. Very good. Very good stuff, and quite a journey. You've accomplished a lot in an unorthodox way, which I really respect. So, okay. Well, Eddie, thanks for. What's that?
The respect is mutual, my friend.
Thank you. All right. Well, thanks for being on Reporter, and keep in touch.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Reporter Podcast with Beau Berman. Please share, subscribe, and leave a review on Apple Podcasts.